In part 3, we are going to look at the aftermath of this event and see how liberal black people somehow managed to be responsible for ruining it. Not the black conservatives that ran it or the racists that attended it. We'll see how events are described when K. Carl Smith thinks you haven't seen the tape. So in parts 1 and 2, we've seen what black conservative K. Carl Smith had to say at CPAC. We've seen him suggest that Frederick Douglass ran away from slave master-run health care. We've seen him patiently listen as white separatist Scott Terry suggests that America should go back to racial segregation. We've seen him allow black audience member Kim Brown to be shouted down for daring to suggest that he was misleading the audience, both on history and on the best way to reach the black community. I believe this would have happened with most black Republicans. Any one of them would have declared the black woman in the room to have been the villain too, because they would have had no choice. Because that's what you do when you're a professional black Republican. You're always either selling a bunch of crap or taking a bunch of crap. And when you can't take it anymore, you get out, like Colin Powell. Or you stay in, stand up, and find yourself on the outs, like Michael Steele. But the entire incident and the explanation offered of the event and its aftermath by K. Carl Smith is so cowardly and so dishonest that I am waiting for the next wave of black Republicans to declare themselves independent, as Ken Barnes did a few years ago. As you might imagine, there was a real frenzy after the event. A black conservative led a session on thwarting claims of racism at CPAC, and a blatant racist showed up. Stories were done on CNN, Salon, Huffington Post, Think Progress, The Blaze, Talking Points Memo, Mediate, and many other sites. It even prompted a response from my favorite black Republican, Alfonso Rachel. I found Smith's official statement on what he claims happened on a Tea Party website. I was invited by the Tea Party Patriots to conduct a breakout session entitled Trump the Race Card and share the Frederick Douglass Republican message. In the middle of my delivery, while discussing the 1848 Women's Rights Convention, I was rudely interrupted by a woman working for the Voice of Russia. She abruptly asked me, how many black women were there? This question was intentionally disruptive and coercive with no way of creating a positive dialogue. In addition, a young man who wasn't a Tea Party patriot made some racially insensitive comments. He said, blacks should be happy that the slave master gave them shelter, clothing, and food. At the conclusion of the breakout session, I further explained to him the Frederick Douglass Republican message, which he embraced, bought a book, and we left as friends. In addition to this statement, Smith made the rounds to a number of right-wing shows and websites, where he elaborated on what transpired. Apparently, the devil was involved. But first, to the statement. It is true that Kim Brown asked the question about the Women's Convention. But that 40-second exchange is not why dozens of stories were written about this session at CPAC. He says nothing of the other questions she asked, both involving race, the topic of the session. He doesn't mention her statement about his disingenuousness and how she, a black woman, thought Smith was deceiving the crowd about how to do the very thing they ostensibly had come there to do. Not be perceived as a racist by people just like her. A statement that brought reproach and a wave of condemnation from the crowd. How can he fail to mention those things? I mean, why talk about her at all if you're just going to focus on the one statement she made that frankly really isn't worth talking about? Second, it is momentarily confusing to think that Smith talked to Terry after the event and he embraced the Frederick Douglass Republican message. Terry is a confirmed white separatist. He has recent interviews available online on that subject. Further, his friend, Matt Heimbach, is president of the White Students Union at Towson University. He was the one wearing a Confederate flag shirt and a Governor George Wallace button. How on earth is Terry able to reconcile his clearly racist beliefs with Smith's form of Frederick Douglass republicanism? Heck, wasn't Douglass in an interracial marriage with a white woman? But then you realize that the session is really only about being accused of being a racist, not actually about not being one. And then it all makes sense. Terry can apparently continue to believe in white separatism and white supremacy, and that black slavery in America is something that blacks should be grateful for, so there really isn't much for him to take issue with. And I love that he knows that Terry bought a book. That's just precious. As Smith made the rounds based on his CPAC exposure, he called Kim Brown a number of things. An Alinskyite, a disruptor. He said she was under demonic influence. But the lesson here, again, is that professional black Republicans are who you think they are. They are fully capable of palling around with racists, bad-mouthing black people, and remaining silent as others trash not only the black people of today, but our black ancestors and black history itself. This is important because the black conservatives' failure to stand up for black people emboldens racists and comforts genuinely good people who, like all of us, wrestle with the great issue of race. And if black people won't stand up for black people, and why didn't K. Carl Smith reach a similar reconciliation with Kim Brown to the one he reached with the racist Scott Terry? Why didn't he seek her out? When he was interviewed on the Exceptional Conservative show, the host, Ken McClinton, stated that Kim Brown was from a, quote, communist media outlet, end quote. I guess he hadn't heard that Russia hasn't been communist for decades, and Russian and U.S. military forces now participate in joint training exercises. On that same show, K. Carl Smith again referred to her as a Saul Alinsky operator, invoking Alinsky's demonic strategy. He also claims that after the session, he talked to a couple of left-wing reporters who told him they couldn't write about the Frederick Douglass Republican message because it was too positive, and they were sent by their editors to write something negative. But the question has to be asked, if Frederick Douglass Republicanism isn't some cure-all for the GOP's frosty relationship with minorities, because of its references to plantations, its twisting of black history, and suggestions that blacks are focused on handouts, what exactly is Smith trying to do? Well, Smith travels around the country pitching Frederick Douglass Republicanism and selling his books on the subject, along with t-shirts, memberships, etc. Along the way, he makes some pretty bold claims about the effectiveness of his system. At an Albuquerque Tea Party event in 2012, he claimed an 87% success rate in converting minorities to the Frederick Douglass system. In a talk given at FreedomWorks in 2011, he claimed a 90% success rate. At that same event in Albuquerque, he claimed that he had 15,000 people that had been trained in his methodology. 70% white, 20% black. 15,000 in July 2012. So then there must be thousands of black people out there claiming to be Frederick Douglass Republicans, right? Where are they? See, these are claims that are great for getting speaking gigs. They're great for selling books. They're great for separating conservatives and Republicans from their hard-earned money. But where are the results? As much as K. Carl Smith insists that he's been inspired by God, and he does so insist, it seems likely that he is motivated less by the Almighty than by the almighty dollar. Again and again, we see professional black Republicans go out and talk not to black people, but about black people. I probably watched a dozen videos of Smith talking about the Frederick Douglass system on YouTube. I did not see a single appearance in front of a black crowd. Now, I am not suggesting that he doesn't speak to black people, but I am asking the same question you might ask of someone trying to sell you magic beans or super secret stock investment strategy or a way to do a work from home money-making venture. If it's so great, if your plan is so perfect, why aren't you doing it?